Hello, everyone, and welcome to Crossing the LD, a show completely focused on veterans transitioning from military to civilian life. Our show is powered by Pivotal Moments, a nonprofit on a mission to strengthen mental fitness for all. Go check them out at pivotalmoments.org to learn more. I'm Lee Elias, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend and co-host, Howie Cohen, and we are privileged today to have Rob Blake with us. Rob held a variety of positions in the U.S. Air Force from June 1991 through July 2001, and during his 10-year Air Force career, Rob installed, operated, and maintained a wide range of radio frequency communication systems. Rob is the co-founder and principal at Verium Corporation. Verium is a service-disabled veteran-owned small business focused on providing mission-enabling IT and professional services to the national security community. The company is founded and privately owned by U.S. military veterans, and the company's goal is to develop strong, trust-based partnerships with their clients and to continuously deliver new value through innovation, mission focus, and common understanding of current and future requirements. Rob is a man that has an extensive experience providing government contracting solutions, and we are pleased to have him on today. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Lee. Appreciate it. I'm happy to be here.
No, it's our pleasure to have you here. So we'll dive right in with the first question, Rob. You chose to leave the military after about 10 years. Can you share with our audience how you made the decision to leave the military and how you chose the path that you did in government contracting?
Sure. Well, I think as most military vets know, that the 10-year mark is you're at the top of the mountain, and if you choose to stay in, you're probably staying in for the full 20. So I happened to be in a place where I was in D.C. I was stationed at the White House Communications Agency and had the clearance, and there was a hot market, and a lot of my friends had stepped out and were doing well in the contracting world. I had orders at the time. I was going to be going to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and as an Air Force veteran, I was going to go to an Army base and be attached to some Special Forces unit there doing comms, and it sounded fun, but I'm not sure if that was for me or not. And so I had to decide whether to sort of jump into the market or stick around and go off and go do that. I was also dating my wife at the time, and I'm certain that life wasn't for her. So all of those things culminated in me deciding to jump out and get in the industry.
Geez, Rob, I did not know that you were headed to Fort Campbell and that you were going to go work for an Army unit. I thought so highly of you. Now the fact that I know you ran away from that opportunity, I think a lot less of you. Jeez, I can't believe I've known you as long as I have, and this is the first time I'm hearing that.
How you know the story. My dad was a Marine, and when I was thinking about joining the military out of high school, I said, hey, I think I'm going to join the military. What do you think, Dad? And he goes, well, don't join the Marine Corps. I don't think you can cut it. He said, you're more of an Air Force kid. And he was right. And so all that played in my mind.
Turns out you're a lot smarter than me. Yeah, joining the Air Force was definitely a much smarter decision than the one I made. So good for you. Listen, I have to tell the audience that I've been a friend and colleague of Rob's ever since I actually transitioned out of the military in 2007. The first company I joined was the Morgan Franklin Corporation, and Rob was already there, and we've been friends and colleagues, and this is back since 2007. We served in Morgan Franklin together for 6 years. Our business unit was acquired by SRA, and Rob, myself, and another gentleman by the name of Chris Herden were three key leaders that helped transition that business unit of ours from Morgan Franklin into SRA. And I've had the privilege to work with Rob, a number of times in my corporate and civilian career, and I just think so highly of him. And I really appreciate your being here, Rob. And with that, look, some of our audience might be thinking about what is it like to work providing contractor solutions. You have well over 20 years of experience doing that. So for the listeners of our audience who may be thinking about, hey, I might want to be a government contractor, how about sharing some of the lessons you've learned over that 20-year period of time and that they might find beneficial and useful?
Yeah, good question. There's pros and cons to everything, right? So first and foremost, it's a really hard business, right? It's really, really hard. There are a lot of rules and regulations and policies and stuff that oftentimes are in opposition to what the customers are needing to accomplish and what the contractors are wanting to provide. It's based on contract life, and so a lot of these contracts are 5 years long, and so employees find themselves fearful for their jobs every handful of years. So, in those regards, it's a tough business to be in. It's hyper competitive as well. And so those things sound, very detracting, but on the other side of it, it's also an extremely rewarding arena to play in. Personally, for me, it's the connection to the mission, and so coming out of the military and then wanting to continue to support the defense community and the intel community and really the national security community at large. I personally find that connection to the mission to be rewarding above and beyond the work that we're doing. And so, the collective we in the government contracting world do some pretty amazing things, right? We develop some amazing solutions and provide some great services. And, you feel a connection to the job that you're doing, whether you're in cybersecurity or application development, what have you. But knowing that you're doing that in support of an important mission of potentially national security, or it doesn't even have to be a national security mission. That's kind of the big reward there. There are some specialties within the space that are zero or near zero unemployment rate. And so it's a sturdy business to be in as well. That's another benefit to it. So, if you're in cybersecurity or your application development or some of those types of advanced IT type of things, there's no shortage of jobs. And so, I guess the overall the lessons I've learned about it are it's tough business to be in, but also equally rewarding. And if you're up for the challenge and you feel the connection to the mission, it's probably for you.
Hey, Rob, and you kind of just prompted something in my mind. I know something I had a challenge with, and you'll recall this because you were there when I was going through it. Having over 27 plus years in the military and having a reasonable level of success in the things I did. When I transitioned into the business world, I had a tough time with that. And because obviously in the military, you're not working in a for-profit situation. You're provided a budget, you're provided people, you're provided the resources you need to get things accomplished. And in working in especially in the government contracting world, your ability to achieve success is literally based on your ability to create profit for the company. Maybe you can share some of your thoughts on that again to kind of highlight some of the challenges, because I want people to understand when they go into government contracting, and I agree with you, it could be incredibly rewarding, but it also could be incredibly challenging. But I want to arm them with the kind of information that'll help them be successful and smooth out that transition for them.
Yeah, another good question. So, stepping out of your boots is hard, right? There are some great characteristics or traits that I think the military develops in people, the work ethic, the service before self, commitment to mission, integrity, those types of things. And those translate directly. The tough pieces of the transition are understanding that when you're in the military, you're in a unit and you're competing for resources with other work centers or units and things like that. Sometimes you're all on the same team, but you're not behaving necessarily like that. There's not necessarily a service provider customer mentality in the military either. You've got a mission in your unit, you're doing that mission, and everything else is sort of in your way sometimes. And so when you get out, that you instantly have to sort of embrace this mentality that I'm no longer in the unit or the organization I'm supporting. I'm a service provider. I'm being paid to be here. My job is really to make the company money. That's a tough one for people to get their heads around, I think. And then you have to take away the desire to want to squabble and those kinds of things, and get into this service provider mentality of, okay, under contract, I'm here to do X, Y, and Z. I'm here to do that for you. What can I do for you? Well, I don't want you to do these things, and you can't push back. You have to sort of, be consultative, give advice, and then ultimately salute and support the decisions that they make because it's their organization, it's their money. Those are tough things, I think, for people to sort of get their heads around. And frankly, I don't think that a lot of industry organizations do a good job of helping people leaving the military understand that necessarily.
Yeah, it's a common thread we hear across the show, is that once people separate, that there's that, almost the drop off point off the cliff, and that there aren't a ton of ways that people can have resources right now to help them transition there. But it's funny because that's one of the themes of the show that we're trying to do, is hopefully provide some of those informations and those stories. Definitely move forward. I'm sorry, Cowboy, I know you had another question.
Well, no, Rob, again, just kind of prompted another thing in my mind was, and you might recall Ed Abner, Rob, that a consultant from another company that Rob Franklin and Bob Morgan hired to actually kind of mentor me through that transition process and teach me things about the business side of, because I think from the military, you feel reasonably secure in your ability to lead people and to motivate people, because those are things that we did routinely, regardless of what your position was or which service you served in. But again, getting a better grasp on the business side of things, I was fortunate enough to have Rob Franklin and Bob Morgan, provide a resource to me to help me through that transition and teach me some of the business things I needed to know and understand to be successful. Hopefully I think those are things that maybe companies or organizations that choose to hire military into their ranks, maybe they can make that commitment to their people as well. And I think it becomes a win-win situation for everybody.
I was going to say that. I mean, that's an investment, and it's a choice, and it's a cost that they have to choose or be willing or be able to make. But I think there's other things as well on the company side. I mean, one thought that I've always had is when you have veterans in your company, like pair them, let them mentor and point them to me. Like, we're hiring a transitioning military person. We're going to pair you with someone who's already walked in those shoes, who's being successful and doing well. Let's have them sort of tell you their experience and help coach you through some of those things. On the individual side, as they're coming out, one of the things I would strongly encourage, number one, I tell this to military people all the time as I interact with them, is build that network, embrace that. All of your, I think of when I was, active duty, enlisted in the Air Force, and I was a young knucklehead in my 20s. And all my friends were young knuckleheads, and we were running around doing knucklehead things. Well, guess what? We all grew up. We all grew up, and they're all out there doing really, really well. A lot of them. Some of them are SESs in the government or GS-15s. Others own their own companies or they're executives in other companies. So that network that you create when you're in, those brothers and sisters that you have for life, stay in touch with them. And as they transition, and you're about to transition, reach out to those people and ask them for advice. I mean, ask them for connections to jobs, maybe in their own company, maybe they connect you to someone that they know in another company, and expand the network even beyond that as well. I'm a veteran, but I separated a long, long time ago. But as I interact with military people, I'm just constantly giving out business cards and saying, call me when you're ready to get out. I may not have anything for you. I'll look at your resume. I'll give you some advice on how to transition and those kinds of things.
Rob, it's a great point you're bringing up, and actually transitions into our next question, which is that some of our listeners may be interested in starting their own company after separating. Can you share how you decided to start your own company and then the steps you took to get that business going?
Yeah, a lot of steps. So, I mean, as far as how the decision went, I never saw myself as that person in the beginning. I mean, I didn't picture myself as a salesperson or anything in the beginning. Right. I was just a doer. And so, you get out and you start dabbling in things, and lo and behold, you realize you had some untapped talent maybe, or it gets developed, by the good companies that you're working with. And so at some point, I was helping these other companies grow and be successful, and I started realizing, why am I doing it for them and not doing it for myself? So I started getting that bug a little bit. There may be some young entrepreneurs out there getting out of the military, and they may want to just do it right from the start. Yeah, and once you get it, you can't go back. I think I just can't foresee myself ever working for somebody again. So once I made that decision, there was actually a fair amount of time of me just sort of thinking through what I would want it to look like. And I should mention, I have a partner, so I'm business partners with a guy named Jeff King. Jeff and I were actually in the military together at White House Comms, and he was in the Navy, and we've been brothers ever since. This goes back to 1996. And so when I was thinking about doing something, he was thinking about doing something, and through some conversation, he said, maybe we should do something together. And I said, what do I need you for? And as we talked about our strengths and weaknesses, we realized that we complement each other pretty well. So um, as far as the steps go, I mean, creating an entity is really easy. It's you can Google search it and figure out how to create an entity. It's more about what do you really need to do to get the company off the ground and running, and then make sure that it's not going to fail in the first year, which statistically many do, right? For me, it was first wanted to define the end game, and I think a lot of people don't think about this, but what do you want the company to how do you want it to come to an end? Are you looking to build up something large and then sail off into the sunset, or do you want to keep it kind of small and it supports your lifestyle, or is it something you want to hand off to your kids? Do you want to create an ESOP and pass it off to your employees someday? There's all kind of different end games in mind, and you should know what that is before you even get started. Two, what's the company going to do? And I mean, again, this sounds kind of elementary, but it's really important to really think through that. Well, we're going to do IT. Okay, well, everybody does IT. So, is there a specific thing? Is there a unique solution that you can provide? Is there unique services, or are there different ways to differentiate? Maybe that differentiation is through your relationships. Like, yeah, I do IT, and it's just like everybody else. However, I really know this environment. I have institutional knowledge in this environment, and I can be really valuable there. They already know me, and they're going to welcome me back. It could be that, or it could be, aside from markets, it could be a specific offering or something like that that you're really, really, really good at. So decide what you're going to do, what you're going to focus on, and who you're going to do it for. And for Verium, it was national security focused and what we call high-end IT services. But really, the issue is the connectivity into some of the spaces that I had worked in over the years. Got some really strong relationships. Some of those knuckleheads that I was in the military with in those organizations, and so that was really the end for me. We knew that we could grow the business in the beginning by leveraging those relationships, which takes me to another point. Having a growth strategy. I see this so often with young entrepreneurs, particularly ones that are technically focused and have less of the sort of the business or the growth background. They know how to execute IT, and so they jump on and say, I'm going to do it, and then they wind up walking around to large companies with their hands out, saying, "Can I get a body? Can I get some work? Can I get some work?" And that's not inspiring. It doesn't deliver any value. Big companies aren't going to be compelled to do that. To just carve off a piece and do you a favor. You may have some relationships, but it's going to dry up at some point. It's not a good model. So, you really need to figure out how you're going to grow the company. Thinking about the infrastructure that you're going to need in place, the HR system, the accounting system, the employee benefits. We had to think through all of these things before we hired our first employee, before we took on our first work. So just all things you got to just sit down and map out. Another one would be how do you measure success? And there are some basic business metrics. Everyone is going to be tracking their annual revenue and profit and those kinds of things. Great. But really, what is it when you think really hard about what it is you're trying to achieve in year 1, year 2, year 3? So, like for us, there were some internal infrastructure things we wanted to get in place in year 1, year 2, and year 3, because we knew that in years 1 and 2, we weren't going to be a prime contractor. We're going to be a subcontractor. So we wanted to prepare and position to be able to be a prime contractor starting in year 3, which we're in now. Things like getting a GSA schedule, and that takes time to prepare and think through. So before we even started the company, we mapped out some of those things, right? What are we going to do in years 1, 2, and 3? And then had a methodical plan to put those infrastructures in place. And then obviously the last one, maybe, I don't know if it's the last one, but maybe the most obvious one is money. Figuring out what you need. And for a lot of companies that do services, it's just front loading, right? You hire people, you go do work. You work for a month, you bill the government. A month later or 45 days later, you get paid. So now you're 4 or 5 payrolls in without getting a nickel of revenue in the door, and you're just writing checks out of your own checking account. So you have to, have a strategy and go to a bank and give them a business plan and all those kinds of things. So those are all things I would encourage people to do. Maybe even capital investment. If you have a solution and you're going to take some time to build something that you can't take to market for 1 year, like you need someone to invest in that, but that costs money.
You
So
know,
those are some of the things we work through. Yeah.
Howie had said before earlier in the show that you were smart for joining the Air Force. You know, I'm a Air Force spouse to my wife. At least I was. So I don't know where that ranks me on the chart of being smart or not. But I will tell you this, that I created multiple businesses towards the last few years of our time in the service. And one of the key points that I tell people, because I'm often asked this question myself, and I said that the gift that the military really gave me was time to prepare everything that you had just mentioned, right? And I think that that's something that, especially if you're a young entrepreneur, you know, it really does take time to develop a business. I think a mistake a lot of people make when they're trying to go down the entrepreneurial path is they go, well, I have a great idea. And it's almost heartbreaking sometimes to have to say it, but a great idea is just never enough, right? It has to be everything surrounding that great idea, from the infrastructure, the people that you have involved. You said capital investments. Money is incredibly important if you're running a business. And I think the stat is 80 or 90% of businesses fail within their first year. You referenced that earlier. But, you know, in addition to time, I was also surrounded by good people. And again, you can speak to this too if you want, but the trick is my business partner, you know, fills in all of the stuff that I'm not good at, and it goes both ways. We fill each other's gaps. It's a leadership thing, right? Like the things that I hate to do, he loves to do, and the things he loves to do, I hate to do. And that has totally paid off, right? And what's been cool about it is that we've been able to kind of carbon copy, you know, with a few moving pieces, our business model to build multiple businesses under the same kind of mentality. But yeah, time, money, and then surrounding yourself with good people, I found that to be really a lot more important than just the idea of the business, right? Because, like I said, if you want sustainability, it's got to be more about the people than the product at the end of the day.
Just to piggyback off of what Lee was saying, I would say that you know, I couldn't agree more with that. There was one other piece of advice I would have for people, and that is have advisors, right? So when you're starting, go talk to others that have walked this path before. Like,
right.
You know, here I'm laying all this stuff out. I would sit down and lay that out for someone who was just getting ready to start. But in one of those other pieces of advice that I would give them would be, think about what you're good at and what you're not good at, or what you enjoy doing, what you don't enjoy doing.
Right.
And if thinking about all the things you have to do to run a business, if there are things that just sap your energy, you might consider having a partner. And in my case, Lee, you know, my partner Jeff and I are completely complementary, philosophically aligned in every way, but our strengths and weaknesses are yin and yang. I'm the big picture guy, the growth guy, the strategy guy, and the details just kill me. They bore me to death. Even in my own business, you know, just digging into the numbers and doing all the research. And Jeff thrives on that stuff. And so we've divided our taskings in that way, and that's our roles in the company in that way. And it's really, really working.
Hey, Rob, what I'd like to do is pull the thread a little bit on some of the things that you mentioned as you grow a company. I know a lot of folks, and I was one of them, as we chose to go into the government contracting world. You're hit with a term called business development. And I remember saying this over and over and over again. I don't want to do BD. I'm not going to do BD. I want, you know, all I want to do is operationally manage a team or multiple teams. But what you realize, especially if you go into a smaller company, you know, everybody's got multiple jobs that includes how to develop the company, how to grow the company. So and you have one of the things I think you excelled at, certainly at Morgan Franklin at SRA when I personally worked with you, is you embraced the concept of business development, all the facets of it. You embraced the concept of the capture manager. And what I'd like you to do is maybe explain to our audience what a business developer does, especially in government contracting, what a capture manager does in government contracting, because these are kind of unique ways to contribute to a company's ability to success and drive profit. And I think the more that our audience, especially that are transitioning into government contracting, understand that, maybe the more comfortable they'll be in those roles if they have a chance to work in them.
Yeah, and I, you know, Howie, I think you know, so, you know, and I've held a number of those kinds of roles. I've been both a BD leader as well as a capture manager. I've led growth organizations that, you know, where all the BD and capture folks reported to me. And I've done it at multiple levels, sort of at a business unit level, corporate level. So generally speaking, the difference between the two is that business development people are focused on opening doors and establishing relationships and understanding client spaces. Capture managers are there to close the deals. That's the major distinction between the two. And so generally, when you hire business development people, you're hiring them because they've got strong relationships, they've got experience developing a growth strategy within a specific market, or maybe a handful of markets. Their job is to walk into the business unit and say, all right, here's the current pipeline of opportunities, and we're currently at this place, revenue and profit wise. I'm going to help get us to here, whatever our goals are, and they develop a strategy to get there. It's knowing those numbers, they have to build a pipeline that's big enough to where we can bid on some subset of those deals, win a subset of those deals, and then achieve enough to hit those goals. So if you think about a deal, the life cycle of a deal, from identification to sort of qualifying it, verifying that it's real and funded, and it's actually going to be competed in a way that we can compete for. Then it gets into the solutioning and capture phase where you're ahead of the request for proposal or request for quote, but interfacing with the customer and trying to improve your probability of winning at that stage. And then finally the proposal phase, and then after that post proposal and award phase. The BD person is there in the beginning, doing all the identification of the opportunity and the early qualification. They're actually reaching out to the customer and saying, hey, I'm tracking this opportunity. Tell me about it. Is it real? Is it going to come out in the time frame that I think it's going to? Is this approximate value? What's your procurement strategy? Are you going to put it on a GSA vehicle, or is it going to come out on whatever, just Fed Biz Ops, or is it going to be a small business set aside? And then once they qualify it and they come back to the company and they say, this is a deal that we can go compete for and it's real, at that point, the company will make a decision to move forward, and then they'll assign a capture manager. Capture manager may not have any experience in that particular market. They don't have to necessarily. Their job, in fact, sometimes it's beneficial for them not to, because you need a capture manager to be objective and to come in and not be sort of drinking your own bathwater, but to challenge the company and say, if we're going to win this, here are the things that we're going to have to do, in spite of what the BD person may say, about his relationships and this thing's locked up. Someone's going to come in and say nothing's locked up. So the capture manager will, at that point, be responsible for getting all the resources. So it's the technical people to develop the solution. It's keeping that business development person there to engage the client and participate in meetings to get more information and to shape and define the opportunity. And to steer it toward the company. It's proposal resources, it's consultants. There's any number of resources, and really the capture manager's job is to think outside the box and figure out what is needed to win the deal. That's developing the win strategy, right? What do we need to do to win? What are all the things that we need? Going and lobbying, selling that to senior leadership, and getting the money to pay for all that stuff. Usually most companies have sort of a target budget, a range for a deal. If it's worth X, some subset of that is what the capture budget will be, and then figuring out how to use that money wisely to improve your probability of winning. And then it's everything from developing the solution, the pricing strategy. Do you have to price it in the basement, or can they afford to to pay more for better value or something of that nature? It's the partners. Who's going to be on the team? Do we need subcontractors and things like that? And everything in between. And then eventually, when it gets to the RFP stage, you've got proposal people lined up, a proposal manager is assigned, and they're working it. And then the business development person's role diminishes at that point. They might be there to do like reviews, iterative reviews of the proposal, or just generally be there to consult. The capture manager is still commanding, the deal at that time. Making sure all the resources are there, making sure everyone's focused, and making sure the story that you developed makes it into the proposal. So that's really the kind of distinction between the two roles. Yeah.
And so, Rob, what I think would be also helpful, because as you're describing this, I think one of the things I kind of learned that helped me kind of deal with this challenge a little bit easier was. Because I like most folks in the military, I was kind of uncomfortable going back to folks that I had previously worked with and asking them for an audience to hear a business development pitch or to make a presentation to them about maybe something that our organization could do. But one of the things I kind of learned after time was, because I remember when I was in uniform, if the person walked into my office was someone who I knew and trusted, then I made all the time in the world for them. If it's someone who I didn't know and I felt like I was just being sold, then I was very uncomfortable making time for them. And so what I learned when I took the uniform off and put a suit on was, first of all, if I believed in the services or the products or whatever it is that we were offering, folks in the government are in dire need of these kinds of solutions. And who else would they rather work with than someone they knew and trusted? And I felt like if I looked at it that way, if I was going back to people because we had a personal, trusted relationship, I was actually trying to just help them solve their problems. And I offer that because I know a lot of folks that take off the uniform and go into the corporate world, especially into government contract, and they're very uncomfortable with business development. But based on the size of the organization, and you've worked in mostly small organizations, everybody wears a business development hat. And I'm just kind of curious how you help, kind of resolve that own challenge in your own mind. And again, maybe that could help our audience.
Yeah, I mean, sort of a couple different lanes on this one. One of the things that I've learned over the years is that really successful companies leverage every resource they have, right? So if you've got employees working at a customer site, they're your best business development resources, right? And they're there having conversations every day, building the trust, just delivering and listening. And so, I have found ways to engage people, and this is sort of a key tenet of working at Verium. Frankly, we tell all of our employees we want them to do two things: look for new ways to add new value, and you'll remember these phrases, Howie, because this is the Morgan Franklin way. Look for new ways to add new value every time you can, and keep your eyes and ears open. Be a sensor for us. And I tell them, I'm not asking you to be a business development person. I'm just asking you to feed the machine. I want to talk to you. I want to engage, and then I engage with them. I get out and I say, how's it going? Tell me what's going on, what's working, what's not working. Through those conversations, you learn things, and I just, encourage them. And then you got to really reward people and take care of them and support that behavior. And you'll find that some people will just naturally have the desire. They want to engage. They want to call you every other night and say, hey, I had a conversation with the customer. I just found out there's some requirement that's coming out, right? And so that's the information, that inside ball that is invaluable. So, sort of helping people realize, don't use the term, don't call them business developers or whatever, but helping them realize that passion that they may have for it and say, don't be afraid of that. You're a salesperson. And then those are the people who eventually sometimes become capture managers or business developers later in their careers. For me personally, sort of another one of the lanes on this is, I had to overcome some of this myself. And I told you right in the beginning of the conversation, I never fashioned myself to be a salesperson or a business developer, but I found myself doing it right out of the gate. One of my earliest stories at Morgan Franklin was we had this maintenance task for that particular customer, and it was broken gear was being shipped down to our facility. We would fix it and send it back. Well, those of us in the communications world, RF communications, preventive maintenance is everything, right? You're trying to prevent that from happening, that gear from failing on the road. And there really wasn't a good preventive maintenance program there. And I had left that organization and had a passion for it. It's something I struggled with myself, right? So I marched my young little butt, inexperienced self, back into that agency and sat in front of the deputy commander, Al Luster. You might remember his name, Howie. And I said, sir, got a thought. I'm with Morgan Franklin now. This is what we're doing for you guys. I really think you need X, Y, and Z, and here's why. And I just gave him a heartfelt. I was there. I saw you out on the road on these trips. You saw what we were dealing with. I think I can fix this for you. And he said, what do you need? And I said, about 8 people to come on site and work in there. And he said, okay, thanks for the brief, and good luck. And like 3 months later, we got a unilateral mod that just came down through the pike. And I didn't realize that I had made that happen. I was just giving the guy a heartfelt pitch. It didn't have, closing a deal or sales in mind or anything like that. I was just trying to help the agency out. So then subsequent to that, once I got a little taste of that, then the answer, what what we were getting from the leadership was from our leadership, Morgan Franklin, was get back in there and sell something else. So now I'm trying to leverage the relationships that I have, and I'm knocking on the doors. And immediately, what happened is some of those friends, like John McQueen, Howie, you and I both know John McQueen, um, one of the best bosses I ever had. I knocked on his door and I started asking him questions, and he said, "Don't do that. Don't be that guy. We go to lunch and we talk about our families and stuff. Right? I'm not going to be that guy for you." And he pulled me aside and put an arm around me and said, "That's not endearing. I'm going to shut it down for me personally. But I'm just telling you, if you go talk to other people this way, they're going to shut you down too. It's not inspiring." So what I realized is I just continued to maintain personal relationships with people and just had regular conversations, the work stuff comes out, the information comes. If you go with an agenda and say, "I want to talk to you about X, Y, and Z," it's like you said, Howie, that person sitting in front of you, like, I'm being sold right now and I'm just uncomfortable. If that person is just, building a rapport and you have a relationship, and then they come in and just want to shoot the bull a little bit, and then, oh, by the way, these other things start to come out, it happens naturally. And for me, once I figured that out, I started positioning myself to be in social environments with these people where I knew they were comfortable and they may let their guard down a little bit. And again, I'm not trying to get anything, I'm not trying to get them to act in a way that's inappropriate or tell me things that they shouldn't tell me. But some of these insights that frankly the government should be sharing openly, and then people are generally afraid to do, it's hard to get. And so I would position myself in places like, right off 17th Street in a little pub down there called the Exchange, and hang out and wait for the people from across the street to walk in. And I would just be, drinking beers and shooting the bull with them. And I gained a ton of information that way. So that for me is kind of how I grew up in that, and sort of figuring that out as I was growing up at Morgan Franklin. So, there's kind of two answers there, how to help young people kind of get over the fear of being a BD person, and how, if you're trying to be a BD person, don't be that used car salesman, and just focus on the relationships.
That's great, Rob. You kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, and again, I want to kind of go back and pull this thread just a little bit more, because I think part of the audience that we're building here with Charlie Mike is not just the veterans that are transitioning from out of uniform into the corporate or civilian world. But I think we're going to actually have, business owners, whether it's corporate or organizational leaders, that are probably going to be reaching out and have reached out and will continue to reach out and hire military veterans into their organizations. And what you've been in a number of different organizations throughout your civilian career. And so what I'm kind of interested in is, how well did those organizations help you transition into their organizations, help you understand their culture, their climate, what went well, what didn't go well? And maybe even more importantly is, what advice would you give to business owners, to business leaders who are hiring military into their organization, to help them be successful in a transition into their organizations?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is I go back to something I said earlier, in that the military tends to develop certain characteristics in people. That it's not to say that non-veterans don't have these traits or can't develop these traits, but the military is really good at developing these traits of sort of the commitment to the mission, service before self, high integrity, just really hard charger mentality that is invaluable to organizations. And so the first thing is just help organizations hire veterans, and the technical skill sets that they bring out of the military are phenomenal. Evolving right now, trying to catch up with the technological world a little bit, but always we've always gotten great skills out of our military veterans. Beyond that, then it's understanding that they have these traits, but there are some other things that they just haven't been exposed to. You might have someone who's got a 10 or 15 or 20-year military career, and you go, this is an experienced person, and you put them on the front lines, and you find out that they're lacking something that they haven't been exposed to, that maybe some of your other folks who took a traditional college to industry route may have. And that's those things about understanding the relationship between service provider and customer and those kinds of things. So my advice would be, find ways to impart that knowledge right out of the gate. Recognize, oh, I've got a veteran who doesn't have this stuff, and pair them with other veterans, if nothing else. I mean, you talked, Howie, about making the investment and having a, and that's great if you're bringing in sort of a senior leader, someone who's transitioning from the military as a senior leader, and you're bringing them in as a senior leader in your organization. You probably want to make that kind of an investment in hiring a mentor for them to help with those things, because again, you're a great example, Howie, or you had just a wealth of leadership experience. You've just never been in business, and so all you needed was someone to just coach you along a little bit, and then you were there because you had all the other tools. So that would be one thing I would share with them. I mean, for me, I think you asked the question of how did that work out for me. I didn't get it right out of the gate. I went to a startup company that and Morgan Franklin was, I think I was employee 25. They had some veterans, but I may have been the first one who transitioned directly from the military in. I think a couple other folks had some other, a few years distance between their military separation and industry. So nobody pulled me aside and said, hey kid, here's how we do things in this world. It was just sort of trial by fire, but I think I quickly picked it up. I think I just didn't see that in any of the organizations, frankly, that I worked at, that really had a focused energy around helping transitioning military people. So I guess the bottom line advice would be do it. Have that forethought to say, I'm going to hire veterans, but I need to expose them to certain things, and so we're going to have a programmatic or systemic way of doing that.
One of the things we talk about on the show a lot, Rob, is what companies can do to be better, and you gave a lot of great suggestions there. One of our previous guests, Mike Black, had said that when you're putting a resume in, put the equivalent of what the workforce job is that your previous military experience had. I thought that was a great suggestion. That not everybody in the civilian world knows what a commander is doing or what the job is doing. I think too, when we look at businesses out there as well, when you're getting someone from the military, you're getting someone that understands teamwork and leadership. And it's a common theme in this show that if you are a business owner, as you are, to respect those as high qualifications that can really push your business to the next level if you're willing to utilize them the right way. And obviously when you bring in things like ego or experience or even political beliefs, that can muddy the waters with those. But the truth is if you're getting someone from the military, you're getting something special if you know how to utilize it. Now, with that said, we have time for just a few more questions. One thing I did want to ask you for in kind of a short answer form is, when you think about your transition, just the 6 months of leaving the military and coming into the civilian world, what went right and what went wrong? If you could change one thing, what would it be? And if you could say to everybody, I did this thing and it was beneficial, what would those two things be?
I picked the right company, first of all. I had in my mind that I wanted to work for a certain culture, and I'm not sure why I had that foresight. I just did. That was something that I cared about. And so, I'd interviewed with and had several offers. And then when the Morgan Franklin thing came forward, I went, these are my guys. This is going to be it.
That's the one, right?
I think, yeah. And I think the thing that went wrong was I probably undervalued myself a little bit and didn't know how to assign, value to me. And so that may have gone wrong initially, but it's worked out well for me. And so what I would give to somebody would be, maybe not focus on that completely. Like don't undervalue yourself, but also I found something that I was passionate about, and I got into doing some things that really made me feel good. And therefore, because I was happy and engaged, I performed well. And then the promotions and pay raises came very quickly.
Right. And that's great advice, not just for military, but for everyone. I'm always astonished when anyone opens up a job, the person gets hired and they don't have a to-do list or here's your role on day one. It's like you said, trial by fire. I think that's just across the board a mistake that employers make sometimes. Now, with that said, I still think for our audience here, I think personnel of the military are probably way more equipped to handle that situation maybe than people that aren't. But I appreciate you making yourself vulnerable there by saying maybe you didn't value yourself enough. I remember watching my wife transition, and my wife is, I'm going to brag about her, but she's extremely qualified. But even she had this kind of like, oh, I don't know how I fit into this world just yet. So I would echo that from the employer side of the table here. If you're coming out of the military, not that you need to walk in with a chip on your shoulder, but be proud of your service, be proud of the work that you've done. And I am guaranteeing you, again, from the other side of the table, that you are bringing something to an organization that they may not have, right? Whether it's your leadership background, your teamwork background, your ability to understand mission and orders and everything that comes along with that. That is not a norm in society.
Right.
That's something that the military does better than anyone else. That's every branch, just so nobody thinks I'm just one, just Air Force or Army or Marines. I mean, every branch exudes that. So, Howie, before I move to the last question, I want to make sure, did you have any other questions you wanted to ask?
No, I think actually you're both bringing up some excellent points. And Rob, it's very interesting as I listen to your story, you're reminding me of my story. The reason I joined Morgan Franklin, the most important thing for me was to find an organization with a culture that I could easily fit into, and not have to give away any of the values that I held dear to me, that I thought made me who I was. I didn't want to sacrifice those. And so that became the most important criteria for me as I kind of looked around at the different companies that I was seeking employment with. And like you, I felt that Morgan Franklin was the best fit for me. So it's interesting that we both chose Morgan Franklin for exactly the same reason. And the thought about undervaluing yourself, I had exactly the same experience. But again, just to tell you the kind of quality leadership, and you know this because you work for them, but the quality leadership that we had with Bob Morgan and Rob Franklin, when I brought that up in a conversation, in a counseling session with Rob, and said, hey, look, I love working here. Just like you said, I love working here. I love who I'm working with. I love what we're doing. But I honestly believed I may have undervalued myself when I took the position here. And I'm concerned about that. But being the kind of quality leader that Rob Franklin was, he addressed that with me. I know he had a conversation with Bob, and they did what they thought was the right thing to take care of me. And so I would echo to folks as you're transitioning, you do have a lot of great qualities, a lot of great experience, a lot of significant things you can offer to the companies or the organizations you're going to go to work for. And don't shortchange yourself with what value that can bring to those organizations. So I just wanted to add on to that, Lee, because I thought Rob brought out some really good points. It kind of reminded me of some of the things I went through.
No, and it's that shared experience that hopefully our audience is learning to grow from. And, Rob, before we let you go, we have to ask this question. Pivotal Moments seeks to strengthen mental fitness worldwide. And one of the things that I find is a common thread, again, amongst our guests, and really upon entrepreneurship, is, man, you better be mentally fit if you're going to start a business, right, to
Amen.
begin with. But, taking the transition or transitioning out of the military, right, transitioning out of the military, it is exhausting. And it's a big process. And like I said, I like to tell people that I mentor that when you're an entrepreneur, when you're starting a business, at some point, and most of the time it's more than once, but at some point there's a leap. And I always explain to people it's a scary point, it's financially terrifying, but at some point you have to make this jump over a cliff to get to the other side, and you have to be mentally tough to do that. And watching my wife and so many other military members leave the military, whether it was retirement or so forth, it's the same leap. Like, you're taking this massive jump from something you really know to an unknown world. And I think a lot of mental fitness goes into that. So my question to you, sir, is how do you define mental fitness, and what do you do to strengthen your own mental fitness and keep yourself, with a lot of endurance with that?
Wow. I mean, what a great question. How do I define it? It's the ability to think on your feet and function and keep your poise in the face of adversity is really what it gets down to. I mean, anybody can lead on a good day. It's how do you lead and perform on a bad day? Some of it's emotional intelligence. Some of it is, generally being a positive person. Do you see opportunity in chaos and those kinds of things? And I generally think that I'm, one of those kind of people that I'm usually pretty positive and And I love being around other positive people. And frankly, when we have hire employees and they create a negative or toxic environment, I have zero tolerance for that. I want to eliminate that from my organization. That's how I define it. What do I do?
Right.
There's the standard answers. I think everyone says things like be healthy, work out, and I'll say on the physical fitness side, like just aside from it's just being healthy. I just have found how he knows is I've not been the most physically fit person, right? And so since I've sort of embraced a different lifestyle and it worked out, I just find that I'm more mentally fit and charged when I do physical activity. When I'm in a good rhythm of doing that stuff, I just feel so much more energy and ability to stay positive. The last thing I'd add to it is having an outlet. Well, there's two things I would add. One is, let me start with carving off time for family. That's something that I didn't do early on as I was growing. I was putting in all the hours, and I was trying to make some time for myself. Like, well, I'm going to go golf this Friday or something like that. That's what I need to do to recharge. And in the meantime, I'm completely neglecting my family. And as supportive as my wife is and was, and small kid at the time. And started getting the like, where's dad type stuff, and that pulls at your heartstrings. What I just figured out was, if they're kind of miserable in the background, it just adds to your stress. And even if they're not really harping at you about it, you can just sense the tension in the house. So I started doing things like, I'm always going to get my son on the bus. Now he's a big boy now. He gets himself out the door. But my youngest son, though, I always made time, to pack his lunch in the morning and do those things, because it was just, might be the best quality time I had with him, that 20 minutes or half an hour in the morning, getting him up and dressed and out the door. When dinner time came, shut down, put the phone aside for a little bit and spend an hour or 2 hours, because I can always get back online later. And I started finding, instead of trying to rush through to 8 o'clock, like 8 o'clock when I flip the laptop open, and the wife and I are on the couch, and she's watching something on TV that, frankly, I probably don't care about anyway. And I'm answering emails and stuff. So carving out that time for family. And then the last one is having an outlet. And because I see this in so many people, like they just don't have a good hobby or anything. All they do is work and come home. And like me personally, I play music. I'm in a band, and that is so much fun for me that I find that after I have a live performance on a weekend, I'm mentally ready for the week. I'm sort of living on that high. So that's my advice.
Right. Just to follow up on that, work-life balance is something we hear all the time. And I agree with you. I don't think people take that seriously. And to be fair to your point, in the startup years, it can be very hard, especially when you have this goal that you're setting and you really want to accomplish it. But the real trap is if you never get out of that kind of mentality, which I think it's awesome to hear that you both said that and that you've done it. I'll tell you this too, that so much of life, and I've learned this from playing sports, I've learned this from being around military personnel, and I've learned this just generally in getting older. But while it's so important to have goals and a vision, it's also so important that you stay in the moment and realize that every day is just a great day if you're working towards that goal or towards that mission. And I had asked an entrepreneur once, what do you love about being an entrepreneur? And he had said to me, and this really rung true. He's like, it's that I can wake up every day and really do whatever I want. And he goes, but I love my job. I love my family. I love my hobbies, everything you just mentioned. And I make time for all of those, right? You don't have to work 20 hours a day to be successful, right? Not to mention the fact that, financially, while finances are very important, I'm not negating that in any way. But there's no amount of money that can really buy happiness. Money just makes it easier. That's what I always tell people, right? There's plenty of billionaires that are miserable, So I always tell people, take a step back, really be thankful, show some gratitude for the good things going on in your life, especially if you're an entrepreneur with a good business. This is just advice, right? Make sure that you're in the moment with your family when you're with your family. When you're at your work, man, be in the moment with the journey of where you're at in that day, that you're an entrepreneur, you have a business that you're working at, and there's people that are employed by you. Just suck all of that in every day and feel it and enjoy it and really make that part of your life. Because here's the thing, like you said, the goals. Well, my goal is to retire when I'm 65. That's great. I'm not going to ignore the 20, 30, 40 years between now and then. I got to live those years, right?
That's right. That's right.
And then what happens? I'm on a beach somewhere miserable because no one's around me. So it's just, one day at a time, whether you're in a military transition or a business transition, if the sun came up today, if the sun didn't explode last night, it's a pretty good day. That's how I always try and look at it. You know what I mean?
And have fun.
Didn't go supernova. So
have fun, right? I mean, that's
right.
a key there too.
Yeah.
Like I don't care what your technical trade is or what your job is. Like if you're not having fun every day, like I have a blast every day. I describe it and like, how's the business going? I go, I'm having a blast.
Right. And if you wake up with I'll reverse that. It's a great point. If you wake up with that tightness in your chest about what you're doing, you need to find some time to really rethink everything, understand why you're feeling that, and get back to what Rob just said. What do you love to do, or what's fun for you? And it can really be anything, because work can be a means to get that too. But Rob, you brought up some really great points today. You've been a great guest. I really appreciate you being here. Howie, I didn't know if you had any final words as well.
No, I think we covered everything that I thought would be beneficial. And Rob, again, I just want to thank you really for taking the time, sharing your stories, sharing your experiences. There's a ton of value for anybody who chooses to listen to this episode that they can gain as they work their transition from the military into whatever they choose to do. And again, I just want to thank you for sharing your experiences, because I think they'll all benefit from them.
My pleasure, guys. Really enjoyed it. Had fun.
Oh, it's our pleasure and well. And we have to let everyone know that you've been listening to Crossing the LD, which is powered by the nonprofit Pivotal Moments, and you can learn more about that organization at pivotalmoments.org. You can get inspirational content, education, or if you'd like to donate, you can do it right there. So that's going to do it for Howie Cohen. I'm Lee Elias. Thanks so much for joining us. Make sure to keep an eye out for more episodes soon, wherever podcasts can be heard. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time. Rob, you have a great day, great life, and everybody take care.